wanted to welcome you back.
Thank you.
You and I earlier spoke about some fun topics related to finance and how it's really important for women to understand their financial status and how to work with someone like a financial planner so that they are in the best position that they can be. Today we're talking about a very fun topic, as we were talking about earlier, which is divorce. And you are a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Yes, did I get it right?
Yeah, I did. CDFA for sure.
What's the process involved to become that?
Yeah, there's a lot of coursework and case studies to become certified as a certified divorce financial analyst. And it's very niched into what the financial planning process is and what decisions and problems arise when people are divorcing and financially uncoupling, to be able to know all of like the pros, the cons, the tax consequences, and the mistakes that people make through that process and how we can help them.
Okay. Let's start off, like, what do you find? So what do you find when divorce comes up, and what problems do you see amongst your clients?
Unfortunately, they're not always the financial or the family CFO, right? So oftentimes they took a backseat to the finances. They know what to do with the day-to-day and what things cost, but the big picture as far as retirement and taxes and financial advisor, all of those kind of big long-term decisions might have been handled through their spouse. And so a lot of time there's that fear of, hey, I don't even know where to look, or like how much is left on our mortgage, or what is my credit score? And it's that fear that they just had that blind faith and let somebody else handle it. It doesn't mean that they're not financially literate or they're not smart or they're not educated, but they could have just shifted gears, right? Their focus was on their family and the household and all of those things. But it's scary when somebody starts asking you questions about things that involve you, but you don't know the answers to them.
Is that something you commonly find amongst women?
I have to say it's 50-50, but usually there's one spouse that kind of controls the finances. And I refer to it as, and it's not always the moneyed spouse, right? Sometimes the moneyed spouse is the person like making the money, but the CFO of the family could be the person making all the decisions and directing all of kind of the decisions around money and finances. So it's not always gender specific, but there's usually an imbalance. And I think where I shine is that I help bring some equality to the table and really help educate people about their finances and increase their financial literacy so that everybody knows what the pros and cons are, how it will impact each party moving forward.
Do you often use an accountant or like a forensic accountant to look at all these things so women are aware of what's going on?
So I can be in two different spaces. I can be an advocate for one party. And so one spouse can hire me and just say, hey, you know what? I don't want to be pressured to signing something that I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
And I need somebody in my corner, and I can be their advocate. And oftentimes I get brought in as a neutral. So if a couple is going through mediation or collaborative divorce or amicable, they want to do this, but maybe they're working with their mediator, but we have to balance out the retirement assets, or we have to buy out a house, and there needs to be some map associated with it, and they're just not sure how to do it. I can get brought in and be a neutral. And so I can explain to everybody what the options are and weigh them out, and then they can decide what's best for them. But oftentimes when I am an advocate, if it's above my pay grade and there might be some marital waste going on, if perhaps there was like an affair or a gambling problem or an addiction, we bring in a forensic accountant to do that separate property tracing and make sure that we're equalized there.
Okay. Women that I see, at least, usually prioritize their children. Are you able to educate them on the long-term impacts of their decisions?
Yeah, we talk about that. And I think that's really a differentiator and a bonus to having a CDFA because you're just trying to get through the day. Often you're not thinking about how the decisions that you're making today are going to impact you 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And so I shed light on that because I'm looking at it through a different lens. So I can see just not today, but 20 years down the line, what this will mean for you in your future. And I want people to know, okay, should I keep the house? Should I buy the house? Should I sell the house? And what does this look like if I sell the house later when I'm no longer married? What happens if I am putting all this money into a 529 account and then I don't have enough money for retirement? So I really try to look at it through a holistic lens. Being that I'm a certified financial planner, it's hard for me to take that CFP hat off. When we're trading off assets, I look at the big picture and try to illustrate what their options are and maybe that there's better options. And if we're in an amicable space, whether it be mediation or collaborative divorce, and everyone's being very fair and transparent, we can come up with creative solutions that work best for each individual family.
Do your clients often seek you out independently, or are they referred to you through an attorney or perhaps a friend or family member that suggests that this person needs to speak with you? How does that usually work?
I'd have to say it's probably 50-50. A lot of people don't even know what a CDFA is, right? They've heard the term forensic accountant, they've heard, but they don't necessarily know what a CDFA is or what it does. So I feel like part of my mission is to just let people know that we're out here and that we exist and we can help and be part of your divorce team. And I'm a big proponent of just that, a divorce team. When we get married, right, we have a wedding party, we have all these people supporting us. And when we get divorced, I think there's a myth that you just need the biggest, baddest shark attorney in town, right? And that's not the case. You want to have a team to support you. People always ask me, who should they call first? And I say, no, the first call should be a divorce coach or a mental health professional, because it's really balancing the emotional, the financial, and then the legal end. I'm a big proponent of the team approach. And even though there's more people that you have to pay, everybody's hourly rate is a little different. If everyone stays in their lane and does what they're best at, it actually saves both time and money.
How do you advise your women clients? Divorce is a big stressor. And when their identity is no longer being a wife, how do you basically advise women to rebuild their identities and rebuild their confidence as well as rebuild their finances?
Yeah, it takes a toll on you physically, right? Emotionally. I think that by educating and really going through the numbers with my clients, they become empowered and they stand at the end of it. They stand a little taller because they know what they own and why they own it. And the second aspect I would say is that divorce coach or mental health professional is there for you to really help emotionally support you through that identity crisis, to say, okay, I'm now divorced, right? It's like the scarlet letter. And there's so much community in divorce, but it's, again, that fear of that unknown that, oh my God, I never saw myself here. But there's a lot of people that are in that same boat. You really get to build that community. And I've seen a lot of divorcees meet other divorcees, really lean on one another and become kind of accountability partners. And you can text them if they're not feeling so great today, or banter back and forth instead of just calling your attorney and complaining. So yeah, I think that having the right professionals on your team, you'll leave the process feeling empowered.
Do women often consult with you even before their divorce to get a better understanding of where their finances are? And do you recommend that's something that we all do, even if we're happily married and there no troubles in the horizon, let's say?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think everybody should know their numbers. know their assets, right? What they own, know the liabilities, what they owe, know their income, what they earn, and know their expenses, what they spend, and know their credit score. Everyone should know those numbers. But specifically when people are thinking about divorce, and I'm very passionate about this because oftentimes people stay in unhealthy relationships because of the fear of lifestyle changes or the ability to we're barely making ends meet now. What is this going to look like for me later? I should just stay. I'll stay with the abuse. I'll wait until the kids are older. I'll wait until they graduate and then I'll leave, or I'll wait until we pay this off or we get there, or whatever that kind of moment in time is. And I offer what's called a divorce financial prep container. It's around $1,000. I will have a one-on-one consultation with you, give you all of the documents that you're going to need, help you build a cash flow for today and then tomorrow, what it might look like, and organize it in a way and give you some basic numbers on what it could look like for alimony or child support and what your options are. And then you can take a pause, right? And it's not, oh, hey, I have to get divorced now. But now you have better clarity of what is something that's marital and what's something that's separate, or what could be divided, or what could be carved out on the side, or what you could be entitled to based upon how long you were married and what your state laws are. So I think that gives people that ability to just say, hey, I'm dipping my toe in the water. I'm not quite sure yet, but I want to know how I'll be on the other side of this, or if it's feasible, or what that might look like. And whether you stay together, whether you go to mediation, or whether you go to litigation, the information that I provide you with during that container will be helpful. And you'll be empowered to know, because I hate when people show up at the attorney's office, right? And they're like, I think I want a divorce. I don't know anything. And then the clock starts ticking. That prepare before you meet with the mediator or the attorney or have that conversation, to be emotionally prepared with a divorce coach or mental health professional, and then be financially prepared with the CDFA. You do it on your own timetable, which I think gives you the control and the power back to make decisions when you're cool, calm, and collected, and not rash and not reactive.
We spoke a bit about this in our first podcast together. What inspired you to become a financial planner? And then secondly, become a CDFA?
Yeah, my why is my mom. She got a divorce and she made a lot of decisions with her heart and not her head. And they impacted her financial future. And I wish that I had the knowledge that I have now back then to have guided her, or that she had a CDFA to be her financial ally. And so I have made it my mission in life really just to educate and empower people who are going through this traumatic experience to have someone they can rely on to think logically and to really project what the options are, what the pros, the cons, and the tax consequences are. Because oftentimes people forget about the tax consequences, and then they're not just thinking the tax consequences today at the table, but 20 years from now, what that means for us. So yeah, I do it for my mom.
That's very inspiring.
She is.
If you had to list some misconceptions that you wish were readily known or you can educate all of us about, what would they be?
I think the first one is just all you need is the biggest, baddest attorney. That if you actually first get the emotional support and then the financial support, and then let them guide you and build your team to find the best attorney or mediator that will fit for you, I think that would be really powerful. If everyone just knew there were other options than just having one person drive the bus. And that team approach really is collaborative and really powerful. Another one is that everything just gets split in half, just 50-50. And It's like we can't split kids in half. We can't split houses in half. We can split retirement accounts in half. But all of those things really matter. And the beauty of mediation or collaborative divorce or any amicable divorce solution is that you can really customize it to what's most important. And so when I meet with my clients, I really try to learn what their priorities are and what their spouse's priorities are. And then know that how do we solve these people's needs and meet in the middle, but both by supporting what they both really want. And you have the ability to become really creative. Like we can say, everyone just says, all right, we have to sell the house. Nobody wants to sell a house right now because nobody can buy a house and rents are just as high as mortgages. And nobody wants to get rid of those 3% interest rate. They're like, both stay together. I don't care. I'll live in the basement. We're not getting rid of that 3% mortgage rate. But there are things that we can do to say, hey, let's co-own the house for a couple of more years, pay down the mortgage. And then it becomes like a tenant landlord situation until we can then, the kids graduate and then we'll sell the house and we'll split the proceeds in a specific portion. So there are things that we can do and be creative that lawyers might not think of or not the normal. I like to think outside the box and get creative when it comes to finding solutions.
Obviously, not every divorce or separation can be conducted in a peaceful way, but it sounds like you try to come to a mediation financially, at least, and maybe in other ways, because a lot of it does boil down to money. When you think about key documents that we should all be aware of, what should women be aware of? What documents should they have on hand to handle their financial picture and divorce?
Yeah, I say it's harder nowadays because back in the day, you could just be like, all right, come home, get the mail first and open all the documents or make copies. But now in our very paperless society, everything is online, right? So there's not always that physical paper trail that we can find. And I always say I'm consistently getting locked out of my own account, let alone there's no way I'm able to remember the password or get into my husband's accounts with two-factor authentication. So it's not as easy as it used to be. But one, you should know where the tax return is, right? The tax return is important and will be a really good starting point. Like if you're married and filing jointly, your name is on it, you signed it, and your accountant has to give it to you. So if you know who your accountant is or know that there's a filing cabinet in the basement with a copy of your tax return, it's a really good starting point because it will give the CDFA some information, kind of like a starting point to start the fishing expedition to know what to look for and which accounts you guys have. I always tell my clients to run their credit report. Make sure you don't pay for a credit report because there are a lot of like scams in that situation, but you can go to annualcreditreport.com, pull your credit report, see what lines of credit are open. Oftentimes people forget that there might be like that joint Home Depot credit card that you have from a long time ago. But you want to see what's open. You don't want to close anything, but you'd be surprised if there are some lines of credit that you didn't know. You just want to keep an eye on them to make sure that there's not any abnormal debts out there. I have seen like when people file, they take money out of their house or they do cash back on a joint credit card because people got scared and have that kind of like flight or flight response. So those are the two things I would say start, but just pay attention to, hey, it's their mortgage company. This is like the name of this and to know. But there's like a complete document checklist I have when I meet with my clients. The mortgage obviously is important, and then the credit report.
Those are all key documents, and yeah, we should all know where those things are located. When a woman is going through a divorce, how do you step in the aftermath after consulting with her? Is that a continued relationship that you have with that client?
So there's 3 different parts that I can help with. One that we talked about before is the pre-divorce financial planning. That sometimes is just, let's get organized. I'm thinking about it. I'm not quite sure. I need to know what documents I need. I know it's going to take some time to gather that information up and get emotionally prepared to do it. That's like the beforehand. Sometimes people just say, all right, give me an hour and tell me what I need to find, and then I'll start finding it and come back to you later. Through the mediation or divorce process, again, I can be either a neutral or an advocate. So depending upon how I get brought in, and I can help with the settlement option. So a recent case I was working on, couple was amicable. They were in mediation and they had to equalize their retirement accounts. There were some accounts that were established before the couple got married. So in New York State, that's considered separate property. That is considered separate property and the growth on that separate property. So we have to figure out not just what they had when they got married, but how much their portion grew while they were married, and then separate what they contributed with marital funds going forward and what that growth was. So there's some math that goes into that and some calculation. And then we were trading off assets as far as, okay, one client needed a little more liquidity for buying a house. The other person wanted more of the retirement assets. And how do we offset that with tax calculations? So during the divorce, I can look at the settlement options. And sometimes people just call me and they're ready to sign. And they're like, hey, can I have 1 hour consultation? Can you just sign this? And is there any red flags here? Is there anything that I should be worried about or be hesitant about with the finances of this breakdown? And then the last part is that post-divorce transition assistance. And it's, hey, now I'm divorced. I now have either a whole house or proceeds from a house. I have a lump sum of retirement money that I didn't have before that I don't know how to manage. And now I have a budget that I need to start beefing up my retirement and start paying these bills by myself without my spouse there. And so I can help really that hand-holding process of how to establish that. And so sometimes I do a piece and sometimes I do soup to nuts. It just depends where you are in the process and where we meet. But I'm happy to just do those little pieces because even sometimes 1 hour with me or a CDFA can really give you that clarity that you need and that peace of mind. And I think that's really important, that it doesn't have to be this huge long investment. Like, we're happy to do that, but we will also just do a checkup, right? Like a consult. Hey, let's get a second opinion. Let's make sure, looking at it from not just a legal lens, but from a financial lens, am I going to be okay? And if not, how should I change this?
Yeah. Can you give us like 1 or 2 examples? I always think these are the most important things where listeners can understand how you actually help an actual person, obviously keeping everything in confidence. But give us like a couple of examples where your work with a woman really changed the outcome of their divorce.
Yeah, so this case that I was working on in the past, the wife was the moneyed spouse and the breadwinner and was diligently putting her money away for long before she got married. She was just a really good saver. And so she had some assets prior to the marriage when they got married. And she really floated the marriage for quite some time and continued to put into her retirement, her Roth, her 457, her 401k. She was such a good saver and really planning for that next phase. And her spouse wasn't as good as a saver, right? His income wasn't as steady. And so we're now at the table. They're meeting with a mediator and they have to equalize some of their assets. And like I said before, there was assets prior to marriage. We had to see what asset she had prior to marriage. And it doesn't always just like line up, right? First, we had to contact the old statements. We had to find the statements of before they got married and then the statements right after they got married. And it was in the middle of the month. So we had to do some calculations. You need to know what questions to ask. And so we went back to the provider to say, were there any additions to these accounts? Because there were multiples through the marriage. And we tried to do a separate property tracing to see how much of this account is marital and how much of it is separate. And because we're going back 20 years, there was a big run up in the market. So the money that was originally deposited prior, like the snapshot of account, was about like $80,000 that was pre-marital that it looked like. And so somebody else, an attorney, a mediator, they might just say, okay, we're going to carve out $80,000 and that's what you had prior to marriage. But it's not just $80,000. It's where that $80,000 grew to today. So then we went back to check. And in this instance, we were able to trace the actual positions and the shares and see what it grew to. And that $80,000 grew to, it was like $370,000 of assets that we carved out to be separate property. And so if I didn't do that due diligence and really do that, peel back the layers of the onion and really call the administrator to see where the other additions were, to see all that things, we could have just said, okay, someone else might have just said, okay, 80,000, this is yours. Everything else is marital. But when you really start to look at it through a different lens, we were able to show her that $80,000 really is worth $370,000 today. And this is all separate and not part of the marital pool that we're going to split.
Yeah, I can't see how anybody could figure that out on their own, especially if you're going back to 20 years.
Luckily, the plan administrator was actually really good getting at the statements, because that's sometimes the holdup is like finding not everything was digital back then, right? To get those statements that are digitized. Now it's a little easier, but we were going back to 2008.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were able to get the statements and able to locate it. And so in that case, the wife was very happy that I was able to do that due diligence and find the separate property for her.
Any other examples that may make our listeners be like, I need to contact Melissa?
So there's another case that I'm working on right now, and they have a house that's almost paid off, and they don't have a lot of liquid assets. So the majority of their assets they put into paying off their house, but all of their other assets are retirement assets. So one of the spouses wants to keep the house. The husband wants to keep the house, and the wife doesn't care about the house and is happy to move out. And so she needs to be bought out of the house, but there's no liquidity there, and they don't want to get a mortgage rate in today's rates in divorce. So they're going to trade off retirement assets, but the money that's owed is $500,000 for the equity in the house. And so it's not just $500,000 in retirement assets that we can give to her in lieu of the house, because we have to take taxes into consideration today. And on the flip side of that, so it ended up being $120,000 in taxes that we had to gross up. So instead of getting $500,000 in cash, she ended up getting $620,000 in retirement assets, because she's going to have to pay tax on those funds when she takes them out in retirement. But in order to find out which tax bracket she was going to be in, I had to look at her pension, her income, her Social Security, and really do a projection as far as we don't want to miscalculate, because if you underestimate, then she's going to have to pay more. If she overestimates. And when they came to me, they were thinking about just cashing it out now, that the retirement account, and just giving it from the husband to the wife. And in which case they would have been in the 32% bracket. And so it would have taken even more money to equalize that. So it was crazy. If they would have taken it out directly and then given her the cash if she needed to buy like a house today, it would have been a lot more money. So I saved them a lot of money in taxes once I really asked the questions of, hey, are we buying a house now, or can we buy something in the future? And when are we going to take this money out? So it's just really doing that deep dive that really matters, and making sure that we are very transparent with the taxes, because that's what can really change somebody's financial situation.
Yeah. I think this is awesome, because we all have our individual professions, but we don't do what you do. So hopefully you don't wish divorce on anyone, but if it does happen, it makes all sense for women to be in touch with you, for you to be their ally. We've talked a lot, and a lot of this has been very illuminating. I feel like this is a carryover from our first episode together, but a little bit more of a niche, obviously.
I'm very pro financial communication and financial literacy. And if you do find yourself that divorce is on your doorstep, build your team. I can't stress that enough. Just getting that emotional support, that financial support, and the correct legal support through this process. And knowing that you will get through this, but you want to get through this with people that you like, trust, and respect to get you through this.
Yeah. You have this code where obviously, at least on YouTube, people can use their phones to find you. But for my Apple Podcast listeners, tell us about your social media handles, or what is your website so that people can find you and learn about you.
My company's name is Mindful Divorce Partners, and it's just www.mindfuldivorcepartners.com. On my website, you can book a complimentary consultation to get on my calendar. If I am not the right person for you, or if you want somebody in person, I'm happy to connect you to the professionals within my network that I've vetted to find you the right support that you need for your divorce.
Thank you so much for joining me again. Yes, both the first one as well as this one. I really think that it helps empower women to take charge of their personal lives as well as their financial lives.
Thank you.